Okay, we leave the PEA behind for a while. Let's ease on into the area of more increased enrollments. These were not necessarily new students. Remember, it's the Depression. What is there outside in the way of jobs? Probably nothing. Why not stay in school? Why not go back to school? If you've already quit and there's nothing out there, go back. There's no shame in that. Plus, we've got all those immigrants coming in, so lots of increased enrollment. And as is usually the case following an influx of students, people start to run around and ask questions. Are we teaching them what's right for them? There's a big concern for curriculum problems, and particularly as they impact the non-typical student. Yeah, I know what we've been doing is just fine for the normal kids, but these kids are not the same. Perhaps they need something different. A nauseating phase, a particularly nauseating phase, the needs of youth, was coined by the NEA. And we had lots of articles being written about what youth needed at this point in time. None of them mentioned that perhaps some of them could have used a good kick in the butt. That was not a publishable need. If you want to look at that particular question, go back to the journals of that particular area and see what it is folks were writing about. A gentleman by the name of E.W. Butterfield was Connecticut Commissioner of Education. He wrote an article entitled The New 50%. Wrote this article in 1934. In it, he said the schools are doing a pretty good job preparing 25% of their population for professional specialization. That meant going to college, preparing for some profession that they would need additional training for. He said they're also doing a pretty good job preparing 25% for folks who are going to enter upon the skilled trades upon graduation. But here's Butterfield's 50% now, the rest of the kids. He said the schools are not doing a good job in preparing kids for the life of one who holds a job. These are not skilled training jobs. These are not the professions. These are folks who simply go out there and go to work. We're not doing a good job preparing them for life. This is the antecedent of what's going to become life adjustment education in the post-World War II years. It also morphs into career education of the late 60s, early 70s, and today's, well, maybe not today because I don't believe it's around much anymore. It has gone away somewhat. Tech prep of the 90s and 2000s. Had it not been for the advent of World War II, what came to be known as life adjustment education may have come into being much earlier. Folks would have got with it, but instead we were worried about the war, and so we let Butterfield's idea lay there. More about curriculum problems. Remember, you've got the influx of kids. What are we going to offer them? The times are favorable to curriculum change and curriculum study. The progressive education comes back again. Now, this is the big thing they did during the 30s. The PEA's 8-year study was the major undertaking of the time, and it spawned many lesser ones. What was the 8-year study? I can just see them sitting at the bar after this convention that they were attending, discussing what should the schools be teaching. And I'm sure someone would ask someone else, okay, if everything was off the table and you could design whatever kind of curriculum you wanted for the schools, what would you do? And so I'm sure they just kind of sat around after that conference and waxed poetically until someone came up with the idea, well, let's try it. The 8-year study ran from 1932 until 1940. For those of you that are mathematically challenged, yes, that is 8 years, hence the title. The study attracted attention and it attracted money. Remember that money we talked about a little earlier that dried up with the beginning of World War II? Well, the 8-year study was responsible for stimulating the lion's share of that money. More on the 8-year study. 30, now originally there were 20 and then 10 more said, me too, can we get in on it? 30 high schools agreed to modify their curriculum and put into place whatever the PEA said they should do. 300 colleges and universities agreed to waive entrance requirements and accept the graduates of those 30 experimental high schools. A new experimental high school program was designed to focus on, some of these are a little bit nebulous, greater mastery in learning. Now, I'm not talking about the mastery learning that has been popular in education. I'm talking about simply greater mastery in learning what was being presented. More continuity of learning. More showing of the interrelationship between subjects. Application, if you will. Increased creativity. Folks were beginning to talk about Terman's work with the gifted and talented, his IQ test, inducing people to be more creative. Going to focus on contemporary social problems, make the school more active, make it relevant into the lives of its students by having the students go out into their own neighborhoods, cities, and work with leaders on solving the problems of the day. Better individual guidance, more counselors in the schools, better counseling in the schools, better teaching and teaching materials. Now, I don't know exactly what they're talking about here. Probably more what we today would call hands-on, getting away from the lecture and into the student does, student learns by doing. So the experimental course is going to be heavier on those items than the traditional school. Finally, on the 8-year study, 1,474 matched pairs of students were tracked through high school and college. So a matched pair would mean a male with such and such an IQ range and another male of such and such an IQ range, going to similarly sized high schools, taking similar courses of study, would be tracked from the ninth grade through graduation from college. And in those days, gang, it took 8 years to do that. Today, it might take a little bit longer. In case you wanted to know, the treatment is the new high school program. The control is the old high school program. And the dependent variable, the thing you are measuring, is achievement in college. The results. The experimental students took the same courses as the control group. And here's the waffle phrase. And seemed to make better grades. And seemed to earn more scholastic honors. And seemed to engage in more extra class activities. And more stuff like that. Now, what does that tell me? Knowing Ralph Tyler and knowing the reputation of Ralph Tyler after the 8-year study, he was a measurement guy. He's behind the philosophy that leads to behavioral objectives. So he has a good reputation. I suspect the experimental kids did make better grades, but they weren't significantly better. They did earn more scholastic honors, but it was not significantly more. I expect that little waffle phrase, and seemed to, is Tyler's way of saying the experimental group won, but it was not statistically significant. My view on statistical significance in education is warped anyway. We ought to be worried about whether something works for half the class rather than for 95% of the class or 99% of the class. Seems to me we ought to be testing at the 0.5 level as opposed to the 0.05 or 0.01 level. Enough said.